The dust from the stagecoach settled slowly on Faith Pemberton's worn boots as she stood before the barber shop in Globe, Arizona territory, clutching a brown paper parcel containing the few possessions she had left in the world. The year was 1883, and the merciless summer sun beat down on the dusty Main Street, making the wooden buildings shimmer in the heat. Her throat was parched, but she had no money for water, let alone the train fare that would take her to a new life in California. Faith tucked a loose strand of her long chestnut hair behind her ear as she stared at the barbershop sign. The thick curtain of hair that fell to her waist was her last asset, the final thing she could sell. She'd heard that hairpieces were all the rage back east, and that women's hair could fetch a handsome price. With trembling fingers, she pulled open the door and stepped inside. The barber shop was cool and smelled of bay rum and leather. An older man with a thick mustache looked up from where he was trimming a customer's beard. "Be with you in a moment, miss," he said, his eyes curious at the sight of a young woman in his establishment. Faith nodded and waited, her heart pounding. She was 22 years old, alone and desperate. 2 weeks ago, she had buried her father after a sudden bout of pneumonia took him. The small homestead they had scraped together over 5 years had been claimed by the bank, along with nearly everything they owned. All that remained were the clothes on her back, a few mementos in her parcel, and the letter from her mother's cousin in San Francisco offering Faith a place to stay. The last customer paid and left, tipping his hat to Faith as he passed. The barber wiped his hands on a towel and approached. "What can I do for you, miss? Ladies don't usually come in here." Faith swallowed hard. I would like to sell my hair, sir. I need money for a train ticket." The barber's eyebrows shot up and his eyes traveled to her long locks. "That's mighty fine hair you got there, thick and healthy. I could give you a fair price for it." "How much?" Faith asked, her voice barely audible. $6, the barber said, assessing the length. "That's more than fair." Faith's heart sank. The train fare to San Francisco was $12. "Is there any way you could pay more?" "The ticket costs $12. The barber shook his head. "Sorry, miss. $6 is my best offer." A deep voice from the doorway interrupted them. "I'll give her the $12. Faith turned to see a tall man filling the doorframe, blocking the afternoon sun. He stepped inside, and she could see him clearly now, a cowboy in his late 20s with broad shoulders, a sun-weathered face, and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his worn Stetson, and a thin scar ran along his jawline. "Rowdy Adams," the barber nodded in greeting. "You looking to buy ladies' hair now?" The cowboy ignored the question, his gaze fixed on Faith. "Where you headed that's worth your hair, miss?" "San Francisco," Faith replied, surprised by the stranger's interest. "My father passed, and I've lost our homestead. I have family there." Rowdy Adams studied her for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He counted out $12 and held it toward the barber. "This should cover a train ticket to San Francisco," he said. Then he turned to Faith. "Keep your beauty, miss. The world's got enough ugliness in it without adding more." Faith stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, I cannot accept such charity. I have nothing to offer in return." "It's not charity," he said firmly. "Consider it an investment in making the world a bit more beautiful." The barber pocketed the money with a shrug. "Suit yourself, Rowdy. Always were a strange one." Faith felt tears stinging her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Adams. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me walk you to the train station," he replied, his expression softening slightly. "Train leaves in an hour if I recall correctly." Faith nodded, still bewildered by the kindness of this stranger. They stepped outside into the blinding sunlight and Faith shielded her eyes. "Why would you do this for someone you don't know?" she asked as they began walking down the dusty street. "I've been where you are," Rowdy said, adjusting his stride to match hers. "Lost everything once. Someone helped me when I needed it most. Figure I'm just passing it along." As they walked, Faith noticed the respectful nods Rowdy received from the townspeople. He was clearly well known in Globe. They passed the general store, the saloon, and the sheriff's office before reaching the train station, a modest building with a covered platform where a few passengers already waited. "Will you be all right from here?" Rowdy asked, standing awkwardly by the ticket window. Faith purchased her ticket with the money he had given the barber. "Yes, thank you again, Mr. Adams. I wish there was some way to repay your kindness." Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or longing. "Safe travels, Miss Pemberton," she supplied. "Faith Pemberton." "Miss Pemberton," he repeated, tipping his hat. "May San Francisco treat you kindly." He turned to leave, and Faith watched his broad back as he walked away. She felt an unexpected pang of sadness at seeing him go, this stranger who had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than she'd experienced in the last 2 years of struggle. "Mr. Adams," she called impulsively. He stopped and turned back. "I'll be back," she said, not knowing why she felt compelled to say it. "Once I'm settled, I mean to repay you." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I'll be here, Miss Pemberton." The train whistle blew and Faith boarded, finding a seat by the window. As the train began to pull away from the station, she caught sight of Rowdy Adams still standing on the platform, watching her leave. She raised her hand in farewell, and he touched the brim of his hat in response. Faith settled back in her seat, her fingers absently stroking her long hair that she had come so close to losing. She wondered about the mysterious cowboy who had saved her beauty and given her hope when she had none. Little did she know that this brief encounter would change the course of her life forever. The journey to San Francisco was long and arduous. Faith spent 3 days on trains and stagecoaches, watching the landscape change from the arid desert of Arizona to the green hills of California. She arrived exhausted but hopeful, her few possessions clutched tightly as she navigated the bustling streets to find her cousin Martha's home. Martha Holloway was a plump, cheerful widow in her 40s who welcomed Faith with open arms. Her modest home near the bay was a far cry from the rustic cabin Faith had shared with her father in Arizona, but Martha quickly made Faith feel welcome. "Your mother was my favorite cousin," Martha said as she served Faith a hearty bowl of stew that first evening. "When she wrote to tell me she was heading west with your father, I cried for days. I'm only sorry we lost touch after she passed." Faith nodded, the familiar ache of her mother's death 12 years ago now still present. "Father tried his best after she died, but farming in Arizona was harder than he expected." "Well, you're here now," Martha said firmly, "and San Francisco is full of opportunities for a bright young woman like yourself." Over the next few weeks, Faith settled into a routine. Martha helped her find work as a seamstress in a fashionable dress shop, where her nimble fingers and eye for detail were appreciated. The pay was modest, but steady, and Faith began to save a portion of each week's wages. She told herself it was to establish her independence, but in her heart, she knew she was saving to repay a certain cowboy in Globe. As summer faded to autumn, Faith flourished in San Francisco. The city's vibrant energy and opportunities were a stark contrast to the hardscrabble existence she had known in Arizona. She made friends among the other seamstresses and even attended a few social events with Martha. Yet despite her new surroundings and growing contentment, Faith often found herself thinking of Rowdy Adams. His kind gesture had affected her more deeply than she cared to admit. At night, She would sometimes find herself recalling his storm-gray eyes and the quiet dignity in his stance. By December, Faith had saved $20 more than enough to repay Rowdy and cover the train fare back to Globe. One evening after dinner, she broached the subject with Martha. "I want to return to Arizona," she said. "Just briefly. There's a debt I need to repay." Martha studied her over her teacup. "This wouldn't have anything to do with the mysterious cowboy who bought your train ticket, would it?" Faith blushed. She had told Martha about Rowdy's kindness when she first arrived. "I promised I would repay him." Martha said with a knowing smile. "And this repayment requires a personal visit rather than simply sending the money by post." Faith's blush deepened. "I gave my word I would return." Martha set down her teacup and reached across the table to squeeze Faith's hand. "My dear, I've watched you these past months. You've built a good life here, but there's always been a part of you that seemed elsewhere. If this journey is what you need, then you should go." 2 days later, Faith boarded a southbound train, a mixture of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. She had packed carefully, bringing a new dress she had made herself from fine blue cotton that complemented her eyes. Her hair, which had grown even longer, was neatly braided and pinned up beneath her new bonnet. The return journey seemed quicker than her escape months earlier, perhaps because this time she was traveling towards something rather than away. When the train finally pulled into Globe Station, Faith's heart was pounding so hard she was certain other passengers could hear it. Globe looked much the same, dusty, rough-hewn, but somehow more welcoming than she remembered. Faith disembarked, clutching her small valise, and surveyed the town. Where would she find Rowdy Adams? She had no idea where he lived or what he actually did for a living. She decided to start with the barber shop where they had first met. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the barber looked up from his newspaper. "Well, look who's back," he said, recognition dawning in his eyes. "The lady who didn't sell her hair." Faith smiled. "Good afternoon, sir. I was hoping you might know where I could find Mr. Adams." The barber folded his newspaper. "Rowdy. He's probably at his ranch just outside town to the north, or he might be at the Silver Dollar if he came in for supplies today." Faith thanked him and decided to try the Silver Dollar first, which she learned was the more respectable of the town's 2 saloons. She hesitated outside its swinging doors, knowing that proper ladies did not enter such establishments unaccompanied. But her desire to find Rowdy outweighed propriety. Taking a deep breath, Faith pushed through the doors. The saloon was dimly lit and smelled of whiskey and tobacco. Several men turned to stare at her, conversation dying as they registered the presence of a lady. Faith scanned the room quickly, her heart sinking when she didn't see Rowdy among the patrons. A heavy-set man with a handlebar mustache approached from behind the bar. "Can I help you, miss? This ain't exactly a place for a lady." "I'm looking for Mr. Rowdy Adams," Faith said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was told he might be here." The bartender shook his head. "Rowdy rode out to his ranch early this morning, said something about a sick calf that needed tending." A voice from a corner table spoke up. "I can take you out there, miss, if you'd like." Faith turned to see a young cowboy, barely older than herself, rising from his chair. "Frank Roberts, madam," he said with a tip of his hat. "I work for Rowdy sometimes. Was heading back out that way myself." Faith hesitated, unsure whether to trust this stranger. The bartender nodded reassuringly. "Frank's good people, miss. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper." "Thank you, Mr. Roberts," Faith said. "I would appreciate the escort." They left the saloon, and Frank helped Faith onto his wagon. As they rumbled out of town, Faith learned that Rowdy owned a modest cattle ranch about 5 miles outside of Globe. "Best boss I ever had," Frank said when Faith asked about Rowdy. Fair man. Tough when he needs to be, but never cruel. Folks respect him around here. Has he lived in Globe long? Faith asked, trying to keep her tone casual. About 5 years, I reckon. Came from Texas originally. Frank clicked his tongue to urge the horses faster. Don't know much about his life before Globe. Rowdy's not one to talk about himself. They crested a small hill, and Faith caught her first glimpse of Rowdy's ranch, a sturdy cabin with several outbuildings, a corral with horses, and pastures where cattle grazed in the distance. It was modest compared to some of the grand ranches she'd heard about, but it spoke of hard work and care. As they approached, Faith saw a figure emerge from one of the outbuildings. Even at a distance, she recognized Rowdy's tall form and broad shoulders. Her heart skipped a beat. Frank waved and called out, "Hey, boss, brought you a visitor from town." Rowdy shaded his eyes against the afternoon sun, watching as the wagon drew closer. When it stopped in the yard, he approached, wiping his hands on a rag. He wore no jacket, just a blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms bronzed by the sun. Recognition flashed in his eyes as Faith climbed down from the wagon. "Miss Pemberton," he said, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "You came back." "I said I would," Faith replied, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "I've come to repay my debt." A faint smile touched his lips. "There was never any debt." Frank cleared his throat. "I'll just put the horses away, boss, if that's all right." Rowdy nodded, his eyes never leaving Faith's face. "Thank you, Frank." When Frank had led the wagon away, an awkward silence fell between them. "You look well," Rowdy finally said. "San Francisco must agree with you." "It does," Faith admitted. "But I never forgot your kindness. I've brought the money for the train ticket." Something like disappointment flickered across Rowdy's face. "Is that the only reason you came back? To pay $12? Faith felt her cheeks warm. "No," she admitted softly. "I wanted to see you again, to thank you properly." His expression softened. "Then you'll stay for supper at least." "It's nothing fancy, but I can offer a decent meal." "I'd like that," Faith said with a smile. Rowdy led her to the cabin, apologizing for its simplicity. Inside, it was clean and orderly if sparsely furnished. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and books lined a small shelf, surprising Faith, who hadn't pegged Rowdy as a reader. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, gesturing to a chair by the fire. "I'll wash up and see about supper." While he was outside, Faith explored the main room of the cabin. The books on the shelf revealed eclectic tastes, volumes of poetry, history, and even a few novels. A framed daguerreotype on the mantel showed a younger Rowdy with an older couple she assumed were his parents. When he returned, his face was freshly washed, his hair combed. He had put on a clean shirt and vest. "I hope venison stew is acceptable," he said, stirring the pot hanging over the fire. "I shot a deer last week." "It sounds wonderful," Faith assured him. As they ate, Faith told Rowdy about her life in San Francisco, her work at the dress shop, her cousin's kindness, the sights and sounds of the bustling city. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. "And what about you?" Faith asked eventually. "How did a Texan end up ranching in Arizona territory?" Rowdy was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. "I was a restless young man," he finally said. "Rode with some rough crowds in Texas, did things I'm not proud of." He looked down at his hands. 5 years ago, I decided to change my life. Came to Globe with what little money I had saved and bought this land. Been building it up ever since." "Alone?" Faith asked, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question. "Alone," he confirmed. "Never found the right woman to share it with." Their eyes met across the table, and something electric passed between them. Faith looked away first, her heart racing. "It's getting late," she said reluctantly. "I should find my way back to town before dark." "Stay," Rowdy said, then quickly added, "We have a spare room for guests. Frank's mother comes by once a week to help with washing and mending. She sleeps there when the weather's bad." He stood and collected their plates. "I can't in good conscience let you travel back to town in the dark." Faith hesitated, weighing propriety against her desire to spend more time with Rowdy. "If you're certain it's no imposition." "No imposition at all," he assured her. That evening they sat before the fire, talking until the logs burned low. Rowdy told her about his cattle, his hopes for expanding the ranch, and the challenges of life in the territory. Faith found herself captivated by his quiet strength and intelligence. This was a man of depth, far more than the simple cowboy she had first taken him for. In the morning, after a breakfast of coffee and biscuits, Rowdy offered to show Faith around the ranch. The day was clear and cool, perfect for walking the property. "It's not much compared to some spreads," he said as they walked along a fence line, "but it's mine. Every post, every board I placed with my own hands." Pride resonated in his voice, and Faith found herself admiring not just the ranch, but the man who had built it from nothing. "It's wonderful," she said sincerely. "You've created something meaningful here." They stopped at the top of a gentle rise that overlooked the entire property. The December sun cast long shadows across the landscape, highlighting the beauty of the rugged terrain. "How long will you stay in Globe?" Rowdy asked, his tone carefully neutral. Faith looked up at him. "My return ticket is for 3 days from now." Disappointment crossed his face before he masked it. 3 days isn't much time." "No," Faith agreed softly. "It isn't." That afternoon, Rowdy drove Faith back to town in his wagon. He helped her find a room at the modest hotel, and insisted on paying for it despite her protests. "Consider it part of my investment in beauty," he said with a small smile, echoing his words from their first meeting. Over the next 2 days, Rowdy showed Faith around Globe and the surrounding countryside. They rode to a hidden waterfall, explored the bustling mining operations that gave the town its name, and ate dinner at the best restaurant Globe had to offer, a far cry from San Francisco's establishments, but charming in its own way. With each passing hour, Faith felt herself drawn more deeply to this complex, honorable man. His kindness wasn't just extended to her. She watched him help an elderly woman carry groceries, stop to fix a child's broken toy, and donate generously when they passed a collection for a miner's widow. On the evening before her departure, they sat on the hotel's small veranda, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I've been thinking," Rowdy said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about what you said regarding your work in San Francisco." Faith turned to look at him. "What about it?" "Globe could use a good seamstress," he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "The closest dressmaker is in Phoenix. Ladies here have to order by catalog or travel for new dresses." Faith's heart quickened. "Are you suggesting I should open a dress shop in Globe?" Rowdy finally met her gaze. "I'm suggesting you might find opportunities here if you wanted them." The unspoken question hung between them. Faith took a deep breath. "Mr. Adams, Rowdy, are you asking me to stay?" "I'm asking you to consider it," he said carefully. "These past days have been—" "I've never—" He frowned, struggling to find the words. "I don't want to say goodbye tomorrow." Faith felt tears prick her eyes. "I have a life in San Francisco, a good position, friends." "I know," he said quietly. "And I would never ask you to give those up if they truly make you happy. But if there's any part of you that could see a future here—" He reached out and gently took her hand. "With me." Faith looked down at their joined hands, her smaller, softer one enclosed in his weathered palm. "This is very sudden," she whispered. "Sometimes life gives you one chance," Rowdy said. "One moment to make a choice that changes everything. When I saw you about to sell your beautiful hair, something told me I needed to help you. I've never regretted it, not for a single moment." Faith's mind raced. Was she really considering abandoning her secure position in San Francisco for the uncertainty of life in a mining town? For a man she had known for mere days, "I need time," she finally said. "Time to think." Rowdy nodded, disappointment evident in his eyes though he tried to hide it. "Of course. I understand." That night, Faith barely slept. She paced her small hotel room, weighing her options. San Francisco offered security, culture, and comfort. Globe was rough, isolated, and challenging. But when she pictured her future in San Francisco, it seemed somehow hollow compared to the vibrancy she felt when with Rowdy. By morning, her decision was made. She dressed carefully in her blue dress, arranged her hair, and went downstairs to the hotel lobby where Rowdy waited to escort her to the train station. His face was solemn as he loaded her valise onto the wagon. They drove in silence, the weight of their impending separation hanging heavy between them. At the station, Rowdy helped Faith down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist just a moment longer than necessary. "Your train will be here soon," he said, his voice gruff. Faith nodded, searching his face, memorizing every line and angle. Rowdy eyed the train whistle sounded in the distance, cutting her off. Passengers waiting on the platform began gathering their belongings. "I should get your ticket," Rowdy said, turning toward the ticket window. "No," Faith said firmly, catching his arm. "I'm not going." Rowdy froze, then slowly turned back to her. "What did you say?" "I'm not taking the train today," Faith said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "I want to stay in Globe. I want to see if there could be something between us." Hope bloomed in Rowdy's eyes. "Are you certain? San Francisco has plenty of seamstresses," Faith interrupted. "But it doesn't have you." A smile broke across Rowdy's face, the first full, unguarded smile Faith had seen from him. Without warning, he lifted her off her feet in a joyful embrace, spinning her around as she laughed in surprise. When he set her down, his expression grew serious again. "I won't make promises I can't keep, Faith. Life here won't be easy. I can't offer you the luxuries of a big city." "I don't need luxury," Faith said, touching his cheek. "I need honesty, kindness, and someone who sees value in beauty. You gave me that from our very first meeting." The train pulled into the station with a hiss of steam and screech of brakes. Passengers began to disembark. "Let's go home," Rowdy said, taking her hand. They returned to town, where Faith sent a telegram to Martha explaining her decision to stay in Globe. That afternoon, Rowdy introduced Faith to several prominent ladies of the town, including the mayor's wife, who was thrilled at the prospect of a proper dressmaker establishing business in Globe. Within a week, Faith had secured a small storefront with living quarters above it. Rowdy helped her clean and prepare the space, building display shelves and a counter. Word spread quickly, and before Faith had even officially opened, she had orders for 3 dresses and several mending jobs. Their courtship progressed with the proper decorum expected in 1883, though everyone in town seemed to know they were destined for each other. Rowdy would ride into town several times a week, bringing fresh eggs or vegetables from his garden, staying to help Faith with any heavy work in her shop, before taking her to dinner at the hotel restaurant. On Sundays, Faith would ride out to the ranch with Rowdy after church, spending the afternoon helping prepare a special dinner or walking the property, planning improvements and discussing the future. They were careful never to be alone inside the cabin. Frank or his mother were always present as chaperones. By spring, Faith's dress shop was thriving. The women of Globe, long deprived of fashion, flocked to her for new dresses, alterations, and the latest styles from the catalogs Faith ordered from San Francisco. Martha had sent her sewing equipment and fabric samples, along with a letter expressing her happiness for Faith's new life. One beautiful April evening, Rowdy invited Faith to dinner at his ranch. When she arrived, she found the cabin transformed. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, candles provided soft illumination, and the table was set with what appeared to be new china. "What's the occasion?" Faith asked, taking in the elegant setting. Rowdy looked uncharacteristically nervous. He had trimmed his hair and beard and wore a new suit that Faith suspected had been ordered specially from Phoenix. "I wanted everything to be perfect," he said, pulling out her chair. After a dinner that revealed Rowdy had hidden culinary talents, he led Faith outside to watch the sunset from the porch. The sky blazed with color, painting the landscape in gold and crimson. "This land looks different now," Rowdy said quietly. "Ever since you came into my life." Faith leaned against the porch railing. "How so? Before, it was just a place I was building. Land, cattle, a house." He moved to stand beside her. "Now it feels like a home waiting to happen." Faith's heart began to race as Rowdy turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Faith Pemberton, when I saw you about to sell your beautiful hair, I never imagined you would become the most important person in my life." He took a deep breath. "I love you. I love your kindness, your courage, your determination. I love how you see beauty in this rough country." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Faith's eyes as Rowdy opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant gold ring with a small diamond. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Rowdy, I will marry you." His hands trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a tender embrace. Their first kiss was gentle, full of promise and shared dreams. They were married in June in Globe's small church, with the entire town in attendance. Martha traveled from San Francisco for the occasion, bringing with her the finest silk fabric for Faith's wedding dress. Rowdy's best man was Frank, who had become like a brother to both of them over the preceding months. After the ceremony, the celebration continued well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and congratulations from everyone in Globe. When it was finally time to leave, Rowdy helped Faith into his wagon, which had been decorated with flowers and ribbons by the townswomen. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Adams?" he asked with a smile. Faith looked up at her husband, her heart full. "I've been home since the day I decided to stay in Globe," she said. "But yes, I'm ready." The first year of marriage brought both joys and challenges. Faith maintained her dress shop in town, riding in with Rowdy when he had business there and staying overnight in the rooms above the shop during busy periods. The rest of the time, she threw herself into ranch life, learning to garden, care for chickens, and even help with the cattle during roundup. Rowdy expanded the cabin, adding 2 more rooms and improving the kitchen. Together, they transformed the simple structure into a true home, with curtains Faith sewed herself, comfortable furniture ordered from Phoenix, and bookshelves filled with volumes they both enjoyed. Their love deepened with each passing day. Faith came to understand the quiet strength that defined her husband, his unwavering integrity, his gentle way with animals, his fierce protectiveness toward those he loved. Rowdy discovered new facets of Faith's character as well: her resilience in the face of hardship, her quick mind for business, her ability to find joy in simple pleasures. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Faith discovered she was expecting their first child. Rowdy's reaction was one of pure joy, tempered with concern for Faith's well-being. "You'll have to slow down," he insisted, watching as Faith continued to work on a dress commission despite her morning sickness. "The shop can wait." Faith smiled at his protectiveness. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Rowdy. Many while doing far more strenuous work than sewing." Nevertheless, as her pregnancy progressed, Faith reluctantly agreed to reduce her hours at the shop. She hired a young woman from town, Rebecca Turner, as an apprentice, teaching her the basics of dressmaking. Their son, William James Adams, was born on a crisp October day in 1885. Faith had never seen Rowdy so overcome with emotion as when he first held their child. "He has your eyes," Rowdy whispered, gazing down at the tiny face with wonder. "And your chin," Faith replied with an exhausted smile. "Stubborn already." Life settled into a new rhythm with William's arrival. Faith's dress shop continued to prosper under Rebecca's management, with Faith creating designs and handling the more complex commissions from home. Rowdy's ranch flourished as well, his herd growing and his reputation for quality beef spreading throughout the territory. By the time William was 2, the Adams family had become one of the most respected in Globe. Their home was often the gathering place for community celebrations, with Faith's cooking and Rowdy's storytelling drawing friends and neighbors for memorable evenings. In the summer of 1888, 5 years after their first meeting, Rowdy surprised Faith with a trip to San Francisco to visit Martha. They traveled by train, William bouncing excitedly between them as he watched the changing landscape through the window. San Francisco had changed in the years since Faith had left, growing even larger and more cosmopolitan. Martha welcomed them warmly to her home, delighted to finally meet Rowdy and young William. During their visit, Rowdy insisted on taking Faith to the finest dress shops and department stores in the city. "For inspiration," he explained, "to keep Globe's fashions current." Faith smiled, knowing his real motive was simply to give her pleasure. As they strolled along Market Street, Faith caught sight of a familiar establishment, the dress shop where she had once worked. "Would you mind if we stop in?" she asked Rowdy. "I'd like to see if any of my former colleagues are still there." Inside, Faith was greeted warmly by the shop owner, Mrs. Harrington, who remembered her as a promising young seamstress. When Faith introduced Rowdy and William, Mrs. Harrington's eyebrows rose in surprise. "So this is why you left us," she said with a smile. "I always wondered what became of you, Faith. You were one of my best workers." "Life took an unexpected turn," Faith replied, squeezing Rowdy's hand. "The best kind of unexpected." Mrs. Harrington nodded approvingly. "Well, it certainly seems to have worked out beautifully for you, though I must say San Francisco's loss was clearly Arizona's gain." Later, as they walked back to Martha's home, Rowdy asked, "Do you ever regret it, leaving all this behind?" Faith looked around at the bustling city streets, the elegant buildings, the fashionable ladies in their finery. Then she looked at Rowdy carrying their sleepy son, his face still handsome and weathered from working outdoors, his eyes still that same storm gray that had captured her attention years ago. "Not for a single moment," she said truthfully. "Everything I need is right here with me." That night, after William was asleep in the guest room, Faith and Rowdy sat with Martha on her small porch, sipping tea and watching the fog roll in from the bay. "I never properly thanked you, Rowdy," Martha said suddenly, "for what you did for Faith that day in the barber shop." Rowdy shook his head. "No thanks necessary. I did what anyone would have done." "But that's just it," Martha insisted. "Most wouldn't have done it. Most would have walked past and never thought twice about a young woman selling her hair for train fare." Faith leaned against Rowdy's shoulder. He's always been too modest about that day. He claims it was an investment in beauty, but I think he just has a soft heart beneath that tough cowboy exterior. Rowdy smiled and pressed a kiss to Faith's temple. "Best investment I ever made," he murmured. Upon their return to Globe, life continued to bless the Adams family. Faith's dress shop expanded to include millinery, with Rebecca now a full partner in the business. Rowdy's ranch prospered, allowing him to purchase additional land and increase his herd. In the spring of 1890, Faith gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha Adams. William, now 4, was an attentive and protective big brother, proudly helping his mother with the baby whenever allowed. As the children grew, so did the Adams' involvement in the community. Rowdy served on the town council, advocating for improvements to Globe's infrastructure and schools. Faith organized a sewing circle that not only socialized but provided clothing for those in need. They faced challenges as well. A severe drought in 1892 threatened the ranch, forcing Rowdy to sell part of his herd at a loss. The following year, Faith fell ill with pneumonia, the same disease that had claimed her father. For 2 terrifying weeks, Rowdy barely left her side, caring for her day and night until the fever broke and she began to recover. Through it all, their love remained constant, a steady foundation that weathered every storm. They disagreed at times, as all couples do, but always found their way back to each other with respect and understanding. In 1895, Globe celebrated its incorporation as a proper city. As part of the festivities, the new mayor asked longtime residents to share stories of the early days. Rowdy and Faith were invited to speak at the town hall gathering. "I'm not one for public speaking," Rowdy protested when the invitation arrived. "Then I'll do the talking," Faith teased. "I'll tell everyone how the mighty Rowdy Adams went soft over a girl about to sell her hair." He laughed and pulled her close. "That's a story worth telling, I suppose." On the evening of the celebration, the town hall was packed with residents. After several speeches about Globe's founding and growth, the mayor introduced Faith and Rowdy. Faith stood, smoothing her elegant burgundy dress, one of her own creations. At 34, she was still beautiful, though fine lines had begun to appear around her eyes, and threads of silver highlighted her chestnut hair. "12 years ago," she began, her voice clear and confident, "I stood in Globe's barbershop, ready to sell my hair for train fare to San Francisco. I had lost my father, our homestead, and nearly all hope. What happened next changed the course of my life forever." She glanced at Rowdy, who sat beside her, still handsome at 39, though his dark hair now showed generous streaks of gray at the temples. "A cowboy stepped into that barber shop," Faith continued, "and with a simple act of kindness, gave me back my dignity and hope." "Keep your beauty," he said. "The world has enough ugliness in it." Faith smiled at the memory. "What I didn't realize then was that this cowboy, my future husband, had shown me the true meaning of beauty. It wasn't in my hair or appearance. It was in the generous spirit that led him to help a stranger in need." Rowdy stood now too, taking Faith's hand. "What my wife isn't saying," he added, his deep voice carrying through the hall, "is that when she returned to Globe months later to repay me, she brought more beauty to this town than I could have imagined. Not just in the lovely dresses she creates, but in the community she's helped build, the children she's raised, and the love she's shown to everyone around her." He looked down at Faith, his eyes full of the same tenderness she'd glimpsed that first day. "The $12 I spent that day was the best investment of my life." The town hall erupted in applause. William and Elizabeth, seated in the front row, beamed with pride at their parents. That night, as they prepared for bed in their comfortable home, Faith watched Rowdy as he removed his tie and vest. "Did you mean what you said tonight?" she asked. "About me bringing beauty to Globe?" Rowdy came to sit beside her on the edge of their bed. "Every word," he said, taking her hands in his. "When I saw you about to sell your hair that day, something inside me couldn't bear to see such beauty sacrificed. I didn't just mean your hair, Faith. There was something about you, a light, a strength despite your circumstances." Faith leaned forward to kiss him softly. "Thank you for seeing that in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Thank you for coming back," he whispered against her lips. "For choosing this life, this town, this rancher who fell in love with you the moment you walked into that barber shop." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. William, following in his father's footsteps, showed a natural aptitude for ranching and animal husbandry. Elizabeth inherited her mother's creative talents, displaying a gift for drawing and design from an early age. By the turn of the century, Globe had transformed from a rough mining town to a prosperous small city. The Adams family had grown and changed as well. William, at 18, began taking on more responsibility at the ranch, allowing Rowdy to focus on his expanding role in local government. Elizabeth, at 15, assisted in the dress shop after school, her designs already showing promise. In 1903, on their 20th wedding anniversary, Rowdy presented Faith with a gift that brought tears to her eyes: a silver hairbrush and mirror set engraved with the words, "Beauty Preserved." "To remind you of our beginning," he said, as she ran her fingers over the engraving. And everything that followed. Faith touched her hair, still long and thick though now liberally streaked with silver. "I've never regretted keeping it," she said softly, "or anything else about our life together." As they entered their third decade together, Rowdy and Faith faced the bittersweet reality of their children growing up and seeking their own paths. William married Rebecca Turner's daughter Alice in 1907, building a home on a section of the Adams Ranch. Elizabeth, determined to further her education, enrolled in a prestigious art school in San Francisco in 1908, living with Great-Aunt Martha during her studies. "They're finding their own beauty in the world," Rowdy observed as they read Elizabeth's latest letter describing her classes and the excitement of city life. Faith nodded, a mix of pride and wistfulness in her expression. "Just as we did." Though the physical passion of youth had mellowed, their love had deepened into something more profound: a partnership of equals, a shared history, a mutual understanding that required few words. They still held hands during evening walks. Rowdy still brought Faith wildflowers from the range. Faith still saved the first taste of each new recipe for her husband. In 1913, 30 years after their first meeting, Globe held a pioneer celebration honoring its earliest residents. Now in their 60s, Rowdy and Faith were recognized as one of the founding families who had helped shape the community. At the celebration banquet, they sat at the head table, surrounded by their family: William and Alice with their 3 children, Elizabeth home from San Francisco with her fiancé Thomas, a professor of architecture she had met through her art connections. The mayor, rising to make a toast, gestured toward the Adams family. "Few stories better represent the spirit of our community than that of Rowdy and Faith Adams," he said, raising his glass. "From a chance meeting at a barber shop to building one of Globe's most respected families and businesses. They remind us that the true foundation of our town wasn't silver or copper from the mines, but the character and heart of its people." Later that evening, as the younger generation danced, Rowdy and Faith stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the Arizona sky. Rowdy wrapped his arm around Faith's shoulders, and she leaned into his familiar embrace. 30 years, he murmured. Sometimes it feels like yesterday I saw you standing in that barber shop. Faith smiled up at him, the lines on her face telling the story of their years together, years of laughter, tears, hard work, and abiding love. And sometimes, she replied, it feels like I've never known any other life but this one with you. Rowdy's eyes, still that same storm gray though now set in a face weathered by decades of sun and wind, held the same tenderness they had shown on that long-ago day. No regrets, he asked, a question he still posed occasionally, as if amazed by his good fortune. Faith reached up to touch his cheek, her wedding ring catching the light from the windows. Only that we didn't meet sooner, she answered, as she always did. Think of all the beauty we could have created with a few more years. Rowdy laughed softly, the sound as dear to Faith as it had been when first she heard it. We've created plenty, he said, nodding toward the window where they could see their children and grandchildren inside. More than I ever dreamed possible when I spent $12 to keep a beautiful stranger's hair. Faith stood on tiptoe to kiss him, a gesture as natural as breathing after 30 years of marriage. The best investment you ever made, she whispered against his lips. Indeed it was, Mrs. Adams, Rowdy agreed, holding her close beneath the stars. Indeed it was.